Pull up a chair. Let me tell you a story about a woman and a child who walked across a muddy lakeshore, and the footprints they left that should not exist. Picture it, a shallow lake in what is now New Mexico at the height of the last ice age. The ground is soft, wet clay along the water's edge. A young woman is walking quickly, and she is carrying a small child on her hip. Every so often, she sets the child down, and you can see the little one's tiny footprints beside hers for a few steps, and then she scoops the child back up, and the small prints vanish, and her own prints press a little deeper into the mud under the extra weight. You can read the whole moment in the ground. A mother, a tired toddler, a walk along a lake. And here's the thing that should stop you cold. Those footprints were pressed into that clay somewhere around 22,000 years ago. Now, why does that matter? Because for almost 100 years, science told us with great confidence that there were no people anywhere in the Americas that long ago, not even close. The first humans, we were taught, did not arrive until about 13,000 years ago. So, according to everything in the textbooks, that mother and child could not have been there. They could not have existed. And yet, there are their footsteps, frozen in the earth, thousands of years too early. So tonight we are going to dig into one of the biggest, most heated arguments in all of archaeology. When did the first people really arrive in the Americas? Who were they? And how did the experts get it so wrong for so long that a set of footprints in the desert could turn the whole story upside down? I am going to walk you through the real contenders for the oldest humans in the Americas, and I am going to be honest with you about which ones are rock solid, which ones are still being fought over, and which ones might just be wishful thinking. Because the truth is, this mystery is not settled. It is being rewritten right now while we speak. Come on. Let's go have a look. Let us start with the old story, the one that ruled for generations, because you have to understand the wall before you can understand who knocked it down. For most of the 20th century, there was one accepted answer, and it was treated almost like sacred law. Back in the 1930s, near the town of Clovis, New Mexico, archaeologists found beautifully made stone spear points buried alongside the bones of Ice Age animals. These distinctive points turned up at site after site across the continent, and the people who made them came to be called the Clovis culture. The dates landed at around 13,000 years ago, and so a story was built. The story went like this. Near the end of the last ice age, small bands of hunters walked across a land bridge called Beringia, a wide stretch of dry land that connected Siberia to Alaska when the sea levels were low. From there, they pushed south through a narrow ice-free corridor, a gap that opened up between two enormous walls of ice as the glaciers began to melt. They flooded into the empty continent, and they became the first Americans, the Clovis people. First, full stop. This idea was so dominant that it had a name, Clovis first. And for decades, it was close to career suicide for a young archaeologist to stand up and suggest that anyone had been here before them. If you claimed to have found an older site, you were assumed to be wrong. Your dating was sloppy. Your layers were mixed up. The experts knew the answer, and the answer was 13,000 years. And that was that. But there was a crack in the wall, and the crack was a problem with the corridor itself. When scientists went back and studied that ice-free corridor, the supposed highway that the first Americans walked down, they found something awkward. The corridor did not actually open up in a usable way until much later than the story needed it to, somewhere around 12 to 13,000 years ago. And even once it opened, it was a barren, frozen, lifeless place for a long time. There was nothing to eat. No way to survive the journey, so if people were already living deep in the Americas before that corridor was passable and it was starting to look like they were, then they could not have come down through it. They had to have come another way. And that other way points to the sea. The idea is called the Kelp Highway. Instead of trudging through a frozen inland gap, the first people may have come down the Pacific coast by boat, hugging the shoreline, living off a rich ribbon of life in the cold coastal waters. Kelp forests, fish, seals, shellfish, seabirds, a moving feast that ran all the way down the western edge of both Americas. You did not need an ice-free corridor if you had a coastline and a boat. You could simply paddle south, camp, fish, and keep going. So the wall started to fall, and the first real sledgehammer came not from North America at all, but from the bottom of South America. In southern Chile, there is a site called Monteverde, and in the 1990s, after years of fierce argument, a group of the most respected and most skeptical archaeologists in the field actually traveled there to see it for themselves, fully expecting to debunk it. Instead, they came away convinced. Monteverde showed solid evidence of people living there around 14,500 years ago. That is more than 1,000 years before Clovis, and it was at the far southern end of the Americas, about as far from that Alaskan land bridge as you can possibly get. Think about what that means. If people were living in southern Chile 14,500 years ago, then they must have arrived in North America and traveled the entire length of 2 continents well before that. The math simply does not work for Clovis first. Monteverde broke it. After that, the floodgates opened, and archaeologists who had been quietly sitting on older discoveries finally felt safe to speak. Now, before we go further, I want to bring you into this because your voice actually matters to where this channel goes next. I am about to lay out the real contenders for the oldest humans in the Americas, and the evidence behind each one is wildly different in strength. So here is my question for you. When you have heard them all, I want you to tell me down in the comments how early you honestly think people arrived on this continent. 15,000 years? 20,000? Older? I read every comment, and the sites you all get most fired up about are the ones I go dig into for future videos. So stay with me, weigh the evidence, and then let me know where you land. All right, let us meet the contenders, and I am going to rank them honestly from the most rock solid to the most hotly disputed. The strongest evidence we have brings us right back to where we started, those footprints at White Sands National Park in New Mexico. This is the heavyweight, and here is why. Footprints are special. A stone tool can get washed into an older layer of earth and fool you. A bone can get moved around, but a footprint cannot travel through time. It was pressed into that exact spot at that exact moment by a living person, and then it was buried and sealed. It is about as direct a piece of evidence as archaeology ever gets. When the White Sands footprints were first dated and announced in the year 2021 in one of the most respected scientific journals in the world, they came back at between 21,000 and 23,000 years old. Naturally, people push back hard because that date is enormous. So the researchers went back and dated the site again using completely different methods. Then they did it a third time. By the most recent counts, there are dozens of separate dated samples using 3 independent techniques, all pointing to the same answer. People were walking around New Mexico more than 20,000 years ago at the absolute coldest, harshest peak of the last ice age. That is the best evidence we have, and it is strong. The next tier down is still serious, respectable science. There is a site called Cooper's Ferry in Idaho where archaeologists found stone tools dating back around 16,000 years published in a major journal with the kind of careful work that holds up to scrutiny. Interestingly, the style of those tools resembles ancient tool-making traditions from across the Pacific and East Asia, which fits beautifully with that coastal kelp highway idea. There's also Meadowcroft Rock Shelter in Pennsylvania, way over on the eastern side, which has shown evidence of people going back roughly 16,000 years, and by some measures even further. Meadowcroft was argued over for decades, but it has earned its place in the conversation. And then there is the one from your script, the one that probably brought you here, Rimrock Draw, a rock shelter in the high desert of Oregon. And I want to be completely straight with you about this one because honesty is the whole point of what we do here. Rimrock Draw is genuinely exciting. Archaeologists from the University of Oregon, working there since the year 2011, found fragments of camel teeth buried beneath a layer of volcanic ash from an ancient eruption of Mount St. Helens. They found finely made orange agate scrapers, and one of them carried the preserved residue of bison blood, suggesting it was used to butcher a large animal. And crucially, some of those tools were found deeper down than the camel teeth, underneath the ash, which by the basic laws of geology should make them even older. The camel tooth was dated to around 18,000 years ago, which would mean the tools beneath it are older still. If that holds up, it is spectacular. But here is the honest part. That 18,000-year date comes from radiocarbon dating the enamel of a tooth. And tooth enamel is a notoriously tricky thing to date, easily thrown off by contamination. And as far as I can find, these results have not yet been published and fully vetted in a peer-reviewed scientific journal. Right now, they live mostly in press releases and field reports. That does not mean they are wrong. It means they are promising and unproven. Even the lead archaeologist has been careful to call it one of the oldest sites, not the oldest. So put Rimrock Draw in the exciting maybe pile, a site to watch, not a case that is closed. And finally, way out at the wild edge of the argument, there is a cave in Mexico called Chiquihuite, where researchers have claimed evidence of people going back an astonishing 26,000 years, or even more. If that were true, it would blow everything else away. But this one is the most fiercely disputed of them all. Plenty of serious scientists look at the so-called stone tools from that cave and argue they are not tools at all, just naturally broken rocks that only look man-made. So treat that one with real caution. It is a fascinating claim, and it is very far from proven. So let us step back and ask the honest question. After all of that, what do we actually know? Here is what is rock solid. The old story, Clovis first, is dead. It is over. There is no serious doubt anymore that people were in the Americas well before 13,000 years ago. That much is settled, and it is a genuine case of the experts being confidently, completely wrong for the better part of a century. They guarded that 13,000-year wall. They punished the people who questioned it, and the ground proved them wrong in the end. Here is what is very likely. People were living across the Americas by at least 16,000 years ago, and the strong evidence from White Sands suggests human beings were here more than 20,000 years ago during the deep freeze of the Ice Age. The genetic studies of Native American ancestry fit with an early arrival too, and they hint at something poetic, that the ancestors of the first Americans may have paused for thousands of years up in the land of Beringia, waiting out the worst of the ice before finally spreading south into a whole new world. And here is what we genuinely do not know. And this is the part that I find the most thrilling. We do not know exactly when the very first person set foot on these continents. We do not know for certain which route they took, and we may be missing the best evidence of all for a haunting reason. Remember, during the Ice Age, the sea level was hundreds of feet lower than it is today. If those first people really did travel down the coast, then the beaches they camped on, the shores they fished from, the very footprints they left are now sitting deep underwater, drowned beneath the Pacific Ocean when the ice melted and the seas rose. The oldest chapter of the American story might be hidden on the sea floor just out of our reach. So I will hand the real question to you because honestly, nobody on Earth can answer it for certain yet. How early do you think they came? And how much of that first story do you think is still down there, buried in the ground or sunk beneath the waves, waiting for someone to find it? Tell me in the comments. That is what this channel lives for, the buried secrets that are still hiding, the stories the ground gives up one stubborn piece at a time. If you want to be here when the next piece comes out of the earth, subscribe and turn on the bell because this story is not finished and neither are we. I will see you in the next one. Until then, stay curious.